Welcome, everyone. We got somebody to cooperate with us today. I was kind of worried about that on Monday, Tuesday. But we really hope you enjoy the Yaggie Steiger Heritage Hall. We got a great program today, some excellent speakers that are going to share some things with you. But first, what I'd like to do is just kind of have a moment of silence here for the two people that aren't here, David and Mark. With that, we'll kick off the program. I have Peter Mandt here from the Western Minnesota Steamthreshers, and I have Douglas Steiger, Brian Steiger. If you don't notice, I'm doing a head count here to make sure all the speakers are here. Kevin Yaggie and BJ Knutson. So, he was standing behind the fender. Howard Dahl. He's checking to see if they were paying attention. At any rate, I'd just like to make a couple comments about Steiger overall and how it's been part of my life and our family growing up. And, you know, when I look at it and I look around here, really what I think of is two things: innovation and customer culture. So what do I mean by innovation? Well, it started with Doug and Morris, and they had a problem and they wanted to get a tractor that would get a lot more work done so their dad could go out and cover a lot of ground. And so the thing about it is, and that's what's made America so special, they had the courage to go ahead and get it done. And they actually got the tractor built, and it's sitting in the building here for those of you that hadn't been in. But Doug tells me that thing ran like 10,000 hours. And so let's give him and Morris a hand for what they built back in 1958. That's what got it all started. But you know, as it kept going, there was innovation all along. And you know, the engineers, starting with Clifton, that worked with Douglas and Morris, and all of the people who've been part of the Steiger tractor engineering team. Tom, you got to yell out his last name. He was in charge of engineering for the first years. Paul Nystuen, Tom Lincoln, who's here. Paul's here somewhere. Barry Batchelor, Bruce Lorenz is still at it, and lots of other people. But all the way along here, when you look at where the tractor started, and we have Series 1 over here. If you get a chance, there's the Steiger Cougar 1. That was the first Series 1 that was built. The tractor over here is the first 2200 production tractor that was ever built. So we have a lot of firsts out here. And you continue forward, and when they came with the power shift transmission in the 1000 series, and then later on with the introduction of the quad track, that was a big change in how we have power out on the farm. So all the way through this, there's been innovation. I was visiting with Howard and talking about his father, and he'll share comments, but you know, some of the innovation that they had to do from the standpoint of the finance and the capital to keep the company rolling. And all the way along, no one ever lost their courage to make the change and make it better. So when I think of Steiger, I think of innovation. The other thing is customer culture. Ever since I was that old, everything to do with Steiger was a can-do attitude. And I've visited with a lot of you that have been farmers and customers for 40 years. And all the way along, that can-do attitude that the company had and the ability for them to build the relationships that they did over the years, that's, I think, one of the things that made Steiger very special. And so, innovation, customer culture. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Peter. He is with Western Minnesota Steamthreshers reunion, and we're very happy that they welcomed us. And when David and Jerry talked about this, I came and I approached them, and They were 100% on board, and I just think the whole thing is just really a win-win for everybody.
Thank you, Peter. I'd like to welcome everybody here, and I hope you enjoy your time at WMSTR. This got to be a pretty amazing thing. You know, it popped up a couple of years ago on our radar, and we talked about it. I got to go visit with David and Jerry. Sat one afternoon and visited for a while, and it's been going on for a couple of years, and we thought, hey, this can be pretty neat. You know, a new building. Of course, you can tell we like to put up buildings out here. But we needed a new gate, west gate, a couple other things, and it just kept growing and ballooning, and it's turned out to be just much a bigger deal and greater thing than we ever thought it would be, and we've really appreciated it. So thank you. It fits in with our mission and our goals. We are here to preserve Midwestern heritage and educate people, and this is just absolutely perfect. So we appreciate everything, and Peter's been working hard. Everybody's been working hard to get this all done, and it's just way beyond what I ever thought it would be. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next, I'd like to welcome Douglas Steiger to share a few thoughts with us. Douglas just shared his thoughts with me. He said, I'm used to doing it alone.
First of all, I want to thank David and Jerry Yaggie for building this building.
Excuse me, Douglas, we're going to have to have you hold the mic a little bit closer.
Okay, you hear me now? Yeah, I want to thank David and Jerry Yaggie for building this nice building here as a replica similar to what our barn we used to build tractors in and some other farm equipment. You know, back when I got involved in business, I was very handicapped, but I had some things that worked for me, and that was I had very good hearing, but I could not speak in front of a crowd. Now it has reversed. I can't hear, but I can speak. Well, Steiger Tractor started with a need, and basically what happened, my dad, my brother, Morris, and I farmed together, and we had some very good years and grew pretty fast on the farm. And then bad years came. We had a lot of rain and stuff, and we couldn't get the crops off. And so what happened, my brother had a TD9 crawler, and I had a WD9 rubber tractor. And we'd go out and do custom work for some of the farmers that didn't have as big a power. And but we had to do all back in those days, moldboard plowed everything, and we had to get the fields all plowed and everything. So we thought if we had enough power so my dad could do all the plowing alone, then my brother and I could go out and earn more money. And that's why we decided to try to build the number one. However, Wagner tractors were already out, and there was 3 of them on the other side of the Red River from where we were, and there was one just west of Grand Forks, and Art Greenberg Farm had one, and we went out there, my dad, Morris, and I, we went out and looked at it, and when you looked at it, we decided we probably could build one also. We didn't need to buy a new one. Well then, I can remember going there was quite a few people over the years. You know, it didn't happen just because it was a Steiger family. There was a lot of people involved, and it was like it was supposed to happen. And I can remember going into the banker, and you can imagine, I thought he was old, but he was probably 50 years old at the time. I was 24. And sitting across from him and explaining to him that, you know, we could buy a tractor for about $25,000, or we thought we could build one ourselves for about $10,000, but we'd have to borrow the money. And can you believe it? The banker said, "I'll borrow you the money. Go ahead and build one." You know, that wouldn't be too common back in those days when you think about it, but that's what happened. Well, anyway, I drew up the first one, and I was 24 years old, and I had drafting class in high school. You can imagine what that is. You draw up a house or something, you got 1/4-inch dimensions. However, the first one was in the gearbox. It'd be hard to explain how that was done, but we didn't have a mill or a boring mill or any way to get precision, so we put the gears in, and we had bearing cages that we could machine in our lathe. And my brother Morse, we put dial indicators on, and then welded these in the case that they had a little bit of clearance. And he watched the dial indicator to see where the shafts were moving to. And basically, we were pretty fortunate. We didn't have any problems with the gearbox. Inside of the gearbox, the number one, the gears are out of a D8 Caterpillar. Anyhow, we had built the number one, and we built some with WD Alice Chalmers ends out of used parts, and some of the neighbors wanted a few of them, so I think we built 3 or 4 of them. I don't remember how many. I think Scott knows more about it. 3, he says. Okay. Anyway, we used to have they called Crookston winter shows, and Earl Christianson was over there for some reason, and he heard about that we had built these tractors, and he came out to the farm, and he said, you know, if you build them out of new parts, we can start a company, and I'll sell them. And of course, we believed him. And you know, there never would have been a Steiger tractor, as it turned out, without Earl Christianson coming out to the farm. And then Clifton Johnson was a fellow that went to a one-room school with me. He was 2 grades behind me, but he worked with us all the way from beginning to every company and everything that I ever was involved with, right to the end. What happened then when we built new ones, we needed a 2-speed gearbox. Now and I didn't have any experience in torque and tire radius ratios and all that stuff. But we had a supplier of the people that supplied the axles, planetary drives, was Shank Power Products. And he had an engineer that had come over from Minneapolis Moline when Minneapolis Moline quit. Anyhow, his name was Bill Swenson. And he sort of took me under his wing or whatever, and taught me a lot on engineering. He gave me charts and how to figure ratios and everything. So you might say in 1 year I had to get a degree in engineering to start building the new models. And now we're talking about boring gearboxes that, you know, were within a couple thousands. But anyhow, Bill Swenson contributed a lot to what happened in the early days. And then Earl Christianson, of course, he was used to sales, and I being so shy that I couldn't even get in front of anyone. But he decided we were going to take a sales trip out into North Dakota. And I can remember we went to Grand Forks, Minot, Jamestown, Fargo, and whatever towns in between. And of course, we didn't sell anything the first trip because new name and everything, and trying to promote something. And I thought to myself, if this is sales, I don't want anything to do with it. And but anyhow, I was sort of thrown into it because Earl's dad, I believe, he died of cancer, and then Earl had to go back quite a bit of the time in their dealership, and I'd hired several different supposedly sales managers. They'd come from, I think one of them was from Alice Chalmers, and one was from Oliver or something like that. But it didn't work because they were used to selling regular two-wheel drive tractors, and to talk farmers up to that much more money when they could buy 3R John Deeres for less money. It would pull 15 plows, and we were talking about 12 bottoms. But so then I was sort of forced into, you'll do things that you thought you never could do if you feel cornered. And that's about what happened. I figured we had no choice. And my brother Morse, he was sort of an expert in welding and machining and that kind of stuff. So I was thrown into the sales end of it. And I'd like to talk about the first tractor that the Yaggie family ever bought. I can remember going with Earl to Leo Yaggie's home in east of Breckenridge, and we were sitting around the kitchen table, and Leo knew what he wanted. He wanted a 1700, and the reason, and I was trying to promote a 2200 because I always liked the 2200 model the best. I thought it was the best value. But he wanted a 1700, he said, because he didn't want to get bigger farming or anything. He wanted to just be able to work the hours that his friends in the city worked, and he wanted to work those hours instead of working big hours. But he bought that 1700, but at one time, I know they had 9 Steiger tractors out there, so yeah, the farm grew, whether he wanted it to or not. And I don't know how many big 4-wheel drives you probably have now in the business, but you got quite a lot of them. But your grandfather said he didn't want anything bigger than a 1700. I remember that, because he didn't want to get bigger. He did not want to get bigger farming. Let's see. I could go forever, but I'm skipping some things. We used the Detroit 2-cycle engine for most of the while we built tractors on the farm. But just about the time when this group from Fargo came and wanted to buy part of the company and move it to Fargo, we determined that the 2-cycle, I think, performed okay, but farmers wanted to hear that sound of a four-cycle when it got down and grunted to pull. So I decided, and I had just designed a 20, we called it 2250. I don't know for sure what they call it in Fargo. Do you? Okay, they called it the Tiger. And we built that thing for 2 years after the business moved to Fargo. That had a V8 Cummins in it. And also designed one with and I just talked to someone that had a couple of them. I don't remember the number of them, but they were a smaller V8 Caterpillar. They were sort of like a throwaway engine more. I guess the last quote I have is I saw this in a magazine. I don't remember who wrote it, but anyhow, he said it's not just the money or the wealth that you leave, but the tracks that you leave that count. And I enjoyed over my lifetime leaving a few tracks. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Brian Steiger up to share a few comments with us. Brian is Morris Steiger's son, and of course Morris and Douglas are the ones that created that first tractor. So, Brian?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I am honored. Okay. I'm honored to be part of the Yaggie Steiger story. I grew up watching my grandfather, father, and uncle work together to bring ideas and concepts to life. I learned that with hard work, perseverance, dedication, and working through countless obstacles, an idea can be turned into reality. Peter wanted me to give a story of one of my first, or a Steiger tractor story. And my first experience of operating a Steiger tractor was like when I was young and my feet would barely reach the floor of the cab. My father took me out to the field that needed to be chisel plowed. As we drove the tractor, and he showed me how the basic functions of the tractor and implement and explained to me was what I was expected to do. When we reached the end of the field, he sat me in the seat, told me to turn at the end, and he jumped off and said, "I'll see you at supper." I'm sure that many people have that first tractor story in their mind. When the Yaggie farm bought their first Steiger tractor, it would be the beginning of a partnership that is strong 4 generations later. I believe our grandfathers would be proud of what we've been able to turn that first tractor into. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Next, I want to invite Howard Dahl to share some comments with us. Howard is President and CEO of Amity Technology.
Thanks, Peter. Driving to Otter Tail Lake from Gwinner in the 1960s, we saw these big green tractors on each side of Highway 13 and Highway 210, and fascinated by them. And my uncle Les Melro, who I had the privilege of riding with periodically, and he usually run out of gas about every 5th time that he was driving somewhere, but Les said, "That's the future. That's the future." And he was so excited about it in the early 60s. And so when the family sold the Melro Company in late 1969, for quite a bit of money, within 12 months, Les was broke. He had invested in Steiger, a bunch of farmland in Phoenix, 1,000 head of Charolais cattle, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And one day my dad said, "Blood runs thicker than water. My brother-in-law needs some help." And so we drove to Wahpeton, where Len Odie was president of Willrich at the time. And Dad said, I'm going to go into Steiger if I can put the right team together. And Len Odie, Jack Johnson were the two people that he mentioned in that trip. And then he went on to say, you may never get an inheritance. We'll see how this turns out. He implemented the Steiger Credit Company, got some financing in place. But the real story of the success of Steiger is driven by something that happened a long way away. In 1972, Russia had a complete crop failure. They went to ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Dreyfus and said, we want to buy X amount of wheat. And then they accepted all 4 bids. And the US government helped fund that purchase. In today's dollars, soybeans were $52 a bushel, wheat was $28 a bushel, corn was $17 a bushel, and that lasted for about 24 months. But the amount of income that farmers realized in that short time was really a key factor in the rapid growth of Steiger, going from 2 million of sales in 1970 to 105 million in 1976. Just an unbelievable growth. Now, one of the fun stories about what happened in Fargo is my dad won't ever tell me who it was, but somebody cornered him who'd had a little bit too much to drink one night and said, we don't like Steiger. You've brought all these blue-collar jobs to this nice town. Because Steiger was employing about 1,000 people at the time. And of course, the IH acquisition of 1/3 of the company allowed the big factory to be built in 1974. And at that time, Steiger was building for Ford, Canadian Co-op in Canada, Alice Chalmers, and then of course the project in Hungary with Rava. So I had the privilege of the 1974 summer working on the Hungarian project for Len Odie. And International Harvester said there's 29 reasons why Steiger should not do this project to get a good axle that would stand up and other things. And Len asked me to write a rebuttal to International Harvester, which I did. And one of the reasons that IH said they shouldn't do it is Hungary's not known as a tractor manufacturing country. I mean, a lot of silly reasons like that. But the Rava axle was a very critical part of the success of Steiger over the ensuing years. Steiger was sued by the federal government in 1975 for antitrust. I think it's the first antitrust suit against a North Dakota company. I had the privilege of living in Chicago at the time and sitting in the trial, and to see what took place, and the judge saw that it was ridiculous and ruled against the government in the case. So you have Big Deer, who may have instigated that suit. We don't know how it all happened, but it was a costly suit. But Russ Freeman, the Steiger attorney, had the wisdom in the initial agreement with International Harvester to even put in a clause that if Steiger is ever sued for antitrust legislation, that IH would pay for it. And it's brilliant that he put it in, but small companies normally don't have to think about antitrust issues. Of course, Steiger then had the IPO in 79, and the early 80s, when company after company were failing, Steiger continued to be a very robust, solid company. And indeed, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article, it was either 84 or 85, saying the only 2 companies they thought that were going to make it through the 80s intact were Steiger and John Deere. And virtually every other company was a casualty of that very, very difficult time. Now, I'm really smart because we started our business in 1981, and sales went down about 20% a year the next 7 years, so you couldn't have worse timing to start our Concord business. So in 1985, Bob Hansen, the CEO of Deere, called Dad and said, I'd like you to Deere's Jet, and Bob Hansen, the CEO of Deere. I wish I had a tape recording of this, because every Case IH dealer would love to have the exact quote. But Bob Hansen said, "We've got more than double the budget for engineering that you have in four-wheel drives, and we still can't build a good tractor." And he said, "I don't know how you did it, how you built that amazing tractor with such a small engineering staff." And if you wished, Paul Nystuen and Barry Batchelor have already been mentioned, but it was a tremendous team of engineers, and it shows what incredibly committed people, even a small team, can do. And then, of course, Case, in its wisdom, took the Steiger name off, and about 2 years later they said, that was a terrible mistake, and they put the Steiger name back on. And I'm so glad for Doug that the name is still there. And Doug is the one person that remained from 1958 all the way through 86 when the company was sold to Case. So he was a very important board member during that whole time, and Dad just thought the world of Doug. Now, Peter mentions innovation, and I'd say that is the hallmark of what's made this company great, and it takes a big team of people. And Dad used to say, you can get anything accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit, and that would be very much his view of life. 3 weeks before he died, my dad, on his deathbed, wanted to know what we're doing that's new. He didn't want to know anything else, but what are you doing that's creative and interesting and new? And so when you're a kid growing up and around the Melrose Company and then Steiger, you are infected with that DNA of what are you doing that's new and innovative, and he believes so deeply in it. And I can still remember driving past the Yaggie farm and seeing the green tractors, and probably 64, 65 would have been the first one on our way to Otter Tail Lake. And it still is one of the great joys I have, traveling all over the world to see the Steiger tractor at farm shows everywhere, and of course the Bobcat. It's, I think, the two signature products of North Dakota to the world. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Howard. Next, I'd like to ask Kevin Yaggie to share a few comments. Kevin is third generation, and I see some fourth generation floating around out here too, so they're keeping on coming up. Kevin?
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the opportunity to represent the Yaggie family today at this event. I'm a third generation in the Yaggie family. I'm working with the fourth and fifth in generations to continue the family farming operations. Today we have 4 generations of Yaggies in attendance. In the 1930s, my grandfather, Leo Yaggie, migrated from Yankton, South Dakota to a farm east of Breckenridge, Minnesota. He was sent there by his grandmother, who owned land in the area. He was given the tasks to improve the land, prepare it for sale, and return to the family dairy farm in South Dakota. Upon arrival at Breckenridge, Grandpa saw how fertile the Red River Valley was. He saw opportunity, he planted his family and farming roots in Wilkin County and never looked back. The soil was heavy in this new land. Some ground was still sod and pasture. His Minnesota ground received more moisture than Grandpa was accustomed to in South Dakota, creating challenges when it came to field traction, laboring through the mud. And as the farm grew, he needed to cover more acres, more efficiently, and in conditions that were not always ideal. His farming career started with the Minneapolis Moline as his main power source. And although the tractor performed well, my grandfather was always searching for something better. In the 1960s, Grandpa met Earl Christianson, an eager salesman from Elbow Lake, Minnesota. Earl was one of the first area dealers to represent a new farmer-built tractor conceived in a northern Minnesota dairy barn. The barn we are in today gives you an idea of the tractor's humble beginnings. These innovators, the Steiger families, farm near Thief River Falls. They, like my grandfather, were dissatisfied with the power and configuration of tractors from that era. Limited horsepower, single axle drive, poor hydraulics, unreliable design, and lack of durability. These were all frustrations that the Steiger boys attempted to overcome, and I say they did a pretty good job. On our farms, we have always appreciated the approach Steiger took towards building tractors. They were farmer engineered. Steiger frames had steel in them. They were stout, delivered long life in tough conditions. They were used proven engines, Caterpillar, Detroit, Cummins, coupled with strong transmissions and final drives from Spicer, Dana, and Rava. Furthermore, many heavy-duty truck and tractor dealers could supply parts for the Steiger tractor, which meant less downtime, affordable parts options, and less travel time to locate parts and service support. This tractor moved our farming operations to a new level. While other mainline equipment companies were experimenting with their own poorly designed engines and transmissions and under-engineered frames, we operated our Steiger tractors with excellent reliability, lower cost per hour, better resale when we decided to upgrade. Some may say the Steiger tractor was excessive in durability. I say they got the job done because of its common sense, farmer-engineered design. Today is a special day. My cousin Mark and his father David Yaggie were two people who understood this Steiger concept. My uncle David fell in love with the first Steiger tractor his dad had delivered to the farm back in the 1960s. David and Uncle Richard loved their first 2200 so much that they put 1,492 hours on it when it was on the farm the first season. Their sister Kathy told me that they really didn't work that hard, but they didn't want to come home and milk the cows, so they stayed out there and did a lot of joyriding. David would incorporate these tractors into his own farming operation, and later when Mark took over the farm, he too saw the value in Steiger product and continued to be loyal to the brand when Case IH acquired the rights to build the tractor. My cousin Mark was always respectful and intrigued by the history of Steiger, and he understood the benefit it brought to our farming operations. Mark worked hard to preserve the history of the Steiger tractors. He located this 1963 2200 and began restoration a few years back. With the help of his friend Ryan Engelman and various farm employees, unfortunately, Mark's life ended too soon in an airplane accident in 2017. David and Jerry, along with Earl Christianson's son Peter, decided now was the time to finish the restoration of the tractor. In June, while visiting with my Uncle David, he asked me if I would help finish getting the tractor restored. I called our farm employee, Corey Schmitz, and talked with our other employees, and they were more than excited for the challenge. After conversing with Brian Steiger and putting a plan together, we got the number 9 2200 Steiger completed in 5 weeks. Brian spent the large part of a week mending the years of labor the Steiger tractor endured on the same grounds the 2200 was built 55 years ago. Brian to this day still engineers and manufactures equipment in the same innovative fashion as the Steiger's generation before him. Thanks to all our employees for going above and beyond to make this project that was a dream of Mark and David's a reality. Additionally, in honor of their son Mark, David and Jerry graciously donated this facility we are standing in today as a tribute to the Steiger legacy and to the impact it has had on our farms and on farms worldwide. My Uncle David passed away in July after a valiant battle with cancer. He would be very honored by your presence here today and would have enjoyed seeing this memorial to Mark and to the Steiger brand. My Aunt Jerry is here with us today. I think it's appropriate to take this time to recognize her, along with Mark's sons, Austin, Trevor, and Dylan, and to pay tribute to Mark and David for their vision in persevering the legacy of the Steiger tractors. Jerry, boys. In closing, the standard that Leo Yaggie set by making responsible decisions in progressing our farming operations has trickled down through the generations. Just as the Steiger brothers worked together to create world-class tractors, my father Don and his brothers, David, Richard, and Bob, have always worked together to keep our family farms alive and thriving. Where we are today is because of the work ethic and perseverance they have shown us throughout the year. The Steiger concept was simple: build a tractor, make it durable, equip it with proven power, and engineer it to outwork and outlast the competition. Certainly, Doug and Morris Steiger accomplished that. Thank you to the Steiger brand for providing a reliable product that has truly helped enhance farming operations worldwide. Thank you to everyone for attending.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, we have BJ Knutson. BJ is the Chief Operating Officer of Titan Machinery, and I'd like to welcome him up here to the stage for some few comments.
All right, thank you, Peter. It's exciting to be here today for the unveiling of this beautiful building and to honor two great men, Mark and David Yaggie, and the Steiger heritage. Like most of you here today, I've been into Steiger tractors for a long time. I remember when I was a kid dreaming of owning one someday. Then I remember driving in the field thinking how much better this four-wheel drive than our stinking two-wheel drive tractors. I thought to myself, now we're getting something done. Steiger tractors have been an important staple in my family in so many ways. Today, working for Titan Machinery, they provided me with a house, paid my bills, and provided me with a lifestyle that I'm extremely thankful for. Much of that success I owe directly to Steiger tractors. And for that, I'm grateful for the Steiger family, Brian, Doug, and your family's ingenuity, innovation, vision, and hard work. It's quite a testament to the Steiger family that we're gathered here today, and the Steiger tractor is still the market share leader in the industry today, and it looks to have an extremely bright future for many years to come. As Kevin mentioned Mark and David, I'd like to expound a little further on some of his comments. Mark and David would have loved this event. It warms my heart to see all of you here that attended today, to honor the Steiger family and to honor Mark and to honor David. Both of those men were very good to me. Mark was one of my great friends, David a great mentor. I have so many fond memories of each of them. David was always professional and kind. I always knew where I stood with David. Peter, you know what that's like. If he was busy, he'd holler at me to get up in the pickup with him or get up in the tractor and let's go for a ride. If I didn't have time to do that because I had to get to another meeting, then he'd give me about 30 seconds and say, what do you got? And I had to get my point across pretty quick. He taught me about hard work. He taught me a great deal about farming and a great deal about business. He was always fair, and he always made me feel welcome. And although much my elder, he always made me feel valued and respected when I was with him and on his farm. David taught Mark a lot too. He raised a man that was one of the hardest working guys I've ever met. Those of you that know Mark well know that about him. He loved farming, and I love the way that Mark farmed. You guys know he went all in. He worked really hard, and he loved spending time with his boys. He loved spending time farming, and I love spending time with him. Hardly a day goes by that I don't think about him and the hours that he and I spent together in the shop, hanging out or riding in the fields together. I remember when Dylan used to ride with us in the combine, and I'd pull up and Mark would whip to the end and kind of slow down, and I'd have to run along the combine and jump in, and he'd yell, "Dylan, get in the back." And so Dylan, after Mark and David got the first 80-10s, there was that ledge in the back there behind the driver's seat. Dylan would jump up there, and I'd sit in the buddy seat, and we'd ride around for quite a while, and we had some good times. Well, nowadays, Dylan would probably tell me to get my butt up there because he's about twice my size now. One thing that David and Mark definitely shared was passion. I don't know anyone here that will dispute that if there's one thing that David and Mark exuded, it was passion. It didn't matter whether they were putting a drain tile, putting up a building, putting up another grain bin, building an air drill, building an air cart, building a beet lifter, building a beet cart, restoring a tractor, or even if they were building a mini airplane for parades. They were passionate about it. Their passion was infectious. Whatever they were doing, you would end up sharing that passion and enthusiasm. And I love that about those guys. They had their disagreements over the years like any father-son business does, working side by side every day. But they got a special opportunity to do that not a lot of father and sons get, to work side by side every day. And I saw it in them, and I know a lot of you saw it in them. They had a deep love for each other and a bond that not many people get to have. I just want to close with a couple comments. What makes today so special is one bond that Mark and David had was Steiger tractors. And they shared an extreme passion for Steiger tractors. So it's such an honor to be here today. Jerry, special thank you for inviting me today. Mark's boys, Austin, Trevor, Dylan. And lastly, I'd like to thank Peter for all the hours that you put in with David working on this building. You've got a tremendous amount of time in this. Nobody will ever know besides maybe Jerry the hours you got in. So thank you very much. Mark and David both loved you and for your passion for Steiger tractors as well. So thank you for making this event a reality today to honor Mark and David and Steiger tractor heritage.
Thanks, BJ. In closing, I'd like to take a moment, and if I forget somebody, there's a lot of things going on, but I really want to thank everyone who helped make this whole thing happen. Jeff, your guys coming up here, we started out with a side hill, and they both kind of scratched their head, and they said, that thing's going to be 80 feet long, and it's going to be level. We got it done. Got a little bit growly when I told them we had to take it down 10 inches after we got it in, but we got through it. So thank you for that. And people at Morton, they're the ones that put this thing together. I got to look around here. All of the help from Lauren Richards with helping with Jeff and them, they got all this rock in here. It was kind of wet here about a week ago. But thank you for them. Thank you for all of the guys that helped me yesterday where we were getting the last things going. And somewhere around here, my wife is here. There's Stephanie. I have to thank her in front of everyone because there's been a little erratic hour keeping going on here for the last 3-4 weeks. She said, Peter, you're retired. And I said, yes, honey. That's when I do what I want to do, and I don't have to do, but I want to do this. So at any rate, thank you. And Titan Machinery. Those of you that know me, it takes quite a bit for me to finally raise my hand and say, guys, I'm starting to feel just a hair underwater here. And I did that about 3 weeks ago, and everybody at Titan said, Peter, what can we do? And they put their resources behind this thing, and all of the artwork and everything you see on the wall, I don't know that Blaze made it out here. He's still probably working on something for me, but they just worked diligently after this whole deal, and they're the ones, when we're done here, we have hors d'oeuvres for everyone out here, and we really want to take the time now when this is done that you get a chance to all get together and kind of share stories about Titan. I've been doing that the last week and a half or so with the people that we've been working on this. But at any rate, thank you, Titan Machinery, for doing that. And thank you to the Western Minnesota Steamthreshers. And most of all, Jerry, thank you for you and David. You know, we talked this over. It started 2 years ago when we first talked about it. I made this suggestion. I thought probably this would be a good spot. It's right in the back door of Fargo, and this is where Steigers are built, and this is where it should be. And boy, I'll tell you what, David and Jerry, they didn't hesitate. They said, Peter, that's it. And so that started it. And of course, all of us know that David really was battling his illness. And I just was so happy that about every 10 days or so, I'd stop by and I'd visit David and Jerry. And when I got my phone out and shared the pictures, why, David was just 100% wound up. He always had to have a project, and this was it. And so, wish he was here to join us. But Jerry, thank you so much, really, for making this happen. And thank you for everybody coming here today. When we're done now, we have hors d'oeuvres inside. You can mill around a little bit. And I would ask that Jerry and Doug and the rest of the speakers here, and is Peter here yet? From Western Minnesota Steamthreshers? I'll look around. We're going to have a quick ribbon cutting ceremony right here. And so anyway, thanks for coming. Have a great evening.